Yay.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our third Housing Justice Forum of 2026. Our first topic covered diagnosing the housing crisis, looking at causes and solutions. Our second one focused on housing vouchers. And today we are looking at gentrification. We have a great special guest that I'll introduce shortly. And we're talking about gentrification because this is something that many of our participants in the first Housing Justice Forum said that they wanted to hear more about. So I'm really excited for today's program. We're going to be starting off with the Making Housing and Community Happen Executive Director, Bert Newton, doing a brief overview over all the great work that Making Housing and Community has been doing this year, has been doing for the past few years. This might be an overview that some of you already know, but since there's some of you that are new to us, and thank you for joining, this will be exciting for you to hear. And then after that, we'll go into our speaker series. So Bert, I'll hand it over to you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give a report on what's happening at Making Housing and Community Happen, or MHCH. First, our local organizing and advocacy. This is how we got started, and this is a picture of us over 25 years ago when we were doing our first inclusionary housing campaign. Locally here in Pasadena, we've won a number of campaigns. I'm just going to give you 4 examples to give you a flavor. So first is inclusionary housing. After 2 different campaigns, one in 2001 and one in 2019, this one ordinance has produced more than 1,600 units of affordable housing throughout Pasadena. Another example of one of our victories is Heritage Square South. This is 69 units of permanent supportive housing at Fair Oaks, corner of Fair Oaks and Orange Grove. This is permanent supportive housing for formerly unhoused seniors. It's brand new building, opened up in 2024. It's the result of a campaign from 2018. We've also won approval of over 100 units of affordable housing in the vacant lot right across from City Hall in our Civic Center, and also 110 units of affordable housing at the old Roosevelt Elementary School site. So these are just 4 of the many victories that we've won over the years. We've won a lot of others, but recently we formed a couple of housing justice fellowships. These are small groups that meet in people's homes for fellowship and working on affordable housing. And one of the people that's been hosting them is here tonight, Donna Lee. You can thank her for hosting one of our housing justice fellowships. One of our groups is working to get affordable housing approved on a second school site owned by the school district, either on a closed school site or on some other excess land that the district owns. The other group is working on local funding sources for affordable housing. Other than the fund created by our inclusionary housing ordinance, the city has no dedicated funding for affordable housing. So we're exploring ways to raise revenue from wealthy interests that benefit disproportionately from our city. And we might be able to do this through a transfer tax on high value properties, a vacancy tax on unused properties, or a commercial development linkage fee. Other cities have successfully used these approaches to fund affordable housing, and these approaches require those who benefit most from the community's public investments to give back more. And by the way, I keep meaning to get a picture of one of our housing justice fellowships when I do these presentations, and I keep forgetting to do that. And I always feel like I need to let you know that this picture is not actually one of them. It's just one that I got off the internet. But as I've said before, I promise you that our housing justice fellowship groups are just as good looking as the people in this picture. So if you want to join a housing justice fellowship group, contact me, Bert Newton, 626-993-7958. Or you can contact me by email, Bert, B-E-R-T, at makinghousinghappen.org. That's B-E-R-T at makinghousinghappen.org. That's if you want to join a housing justice fellowship. Next, our North Fair Oaks initiative. For more than a decade, our North Fair Oaks empowerment team has worked with the North Fair Oaks neighborhood on a vision plan to expand affordable housing, improve street safety for pedestrians and other travelers, support economic revitalization, and honor the area's history as a hub of the African American community. As part of this effort, the team partnered with an artist, Jason Smith of Pasadena Mennonite Church to create a mural on the north wall of the Rio Meat Market. The mural features prominent historical figures from the neighborhood, along with QR codes that direct viewers to a website where they can learn more about each person in the mural and the neighborhood's history. I was just up there last week and tested the QR codes. They're working perfectly. Just zoom in on them and they take you to a site where you can learn about the people in the neighborhood. It's great. It's quite a unique mural that way. The North Fair Oaks team has now launched a new public art initiative inspired by the excitement around designating North Fair Oaks Avenue as the Black Legacy District. Also, we are hoping that a time will emerge to explore small business revitalization and to work with the city to consider how those efforts could take shape along North Fair Oaks Avenue. Next, safe parking. Around 15,000 people are living out of their vehicles in Los Angeles County, but for a long time, there was no safe parking program in the whole San Gabriel Valley. So in April of 2021, we started the first safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley at Trinity Lutheran Church here in Pasadena. This program has 10 safe places to park for parkers, for the participants. The participants get access to a bathroom and a shower in the church building, plus a break room. They get case management services from Friends Indeed. They get mental health treatment. They get referrals to other resources, including permanent housing. And so we have permanently housed 23 people through this program. If you know someone who could benefit from the program, you can contact Friends Indeed at 626-797-2402. That's if you know someone who's living in their vehicle and they could use this program. It's call Friends Indeed. They're the ones that manage it. 626-797-2402. Next, one-day housing justice institutes. These institutes actually take months of work. What happens is that Jill gets invited into a community, usually in California, but she's done 7 of these in Colorado and 1 in North Carolina. She gets invited by a local group into the community and spends months with them studying their community, the history of it, how they got to where they are, how the local government works, and what is likely to work in their community to increase housing justice. Then the big day comes and they bring together a much larger group from the community to present what they have learned and discuss all of that with a larger group. The hope is that out of this will emerge a local group like the one that became MHCH. It's a way of replicating our work across the country. One of the best outcomes of one of these one-day institutes is right next door to us in Arcadia. This is how Creative Housing Options in Arcadia was born, which has recently started winning its own housing justice victories, such as an inclusionary housing ordinance. And finally, I want to mention Congregational Land Partners. Congregational Land Partners began as one of our committees, but we spun them off into their own nonprofit last year. Congregational Land Partners consults with congregations to build affordable housing on their land. What
happened?
Are
you okay, Bert?
Okay, so
do you want me to share? It looks like your voice is, you're not able to hear you right now.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So, okay.
Do you need some help, Bert?
Sorry. Yeah, I had this thing in my throat. So I get it sometimes when we're doing this thing. There are 37
why don't I go ahead and just share some of this? Since I'm chair of the board, I have a pretty good idea on it. So we have 37 congregations that we've brought through our 6 steps, and they're close to getting a developer on their site to move forward on their dreams and what they want for their site. That's going to produce 17 100 units, which represents a whole lot of families. And it's very exciting in Inglewood, where we've broken ground. That's an adaptive reuse of a school with 60 units, affordable units. And then they also get a music center and 5 million back. And they did not have to pay for the development. So it's a great project, and that's what we're seeing happen with almost all these congregations we're working with in Southern California.
Okay, yeah. So there've been and what this was pointed out, that we're working with 37 congregations out of 100 that have approached us for 1,700 planning units, and the first one is actually broken ground in Inglewood. And that's a picture of the Inglewood Church right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize. I sometimes get these experiences. I can't describe them, where I get confused for a moment and have to recapture myself. So that just happened. To participate in the cohort, if you want your church to participate in the cohort, because there's one coming up on September 12th, to participate in this, you have to participate in a series of classes. And the next one is on September 12th. But contact Phil Burns at 626-795-9771, 626-795-9771, or Phil at conglandpartners.com. Things.com, right? I can't see for the .org.
You can also contact.
Phil
Yeah.
Phil at conglandpartners.org. So you see it there on the screen. And that concludes what's happening at MHCH. So sorry about that. I do sometimes have a thing recently that happens, and I have to take a pause.
Well,
so thanks, Jill, for jumping in and
No problem.
All right.
Well, Bert, if I had to recite everything that you all have been doing the past year, the exact same thing would happen to me too. It's a yeah, if you all would join me in giving the MHCH team a round of applause or a pat on the back on everything that you've all been doing. It's very impressive. And then next, we're going to move on to our special guest. And so I'm going to be introducing Thomas Irwin. Thomas Irwin is a staff member at Servant Partners and a co-founder and director of the Faith and Housing Coalition in Los Angeles. He is passionate about integrating the work he has done on economic development and economic policy into the church, and has worked to try to co-create economic opportunity with his neighbors on the East Side. He lives in the City Terrace neighborhood of East LA with his wife and 2 kids. And now the floor is yours, Thomas, to do an overview of gentrification and your personal story.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I was thinking today that when Bert emailed me to ask if I was interested in sharing, I was both honored and a little bit terrified, because gentrification is such a complex topic, and I know I would not be able to do full justice to it. Give me one second to I knew I would not be able to do full justice to it in the short period of time that I had. I also knew that I am not someone who grew up experiencing gentrification in my own community. I am someone who grew up where I am currently in Virginia. I moved to LA as an idealistic 20-something I moved into a gentrifying neighborhood, inspired by the legacy of someone like John Perkins up in Northwest Pasadena, to do similarly, to get involved in a community, to create economic opportunity, to learn from my neighbors. And I had to work backwards from what I saw on the ground in my neighborhood, to create an intellectual understanding what was happening and what my place was in it. So just for some context, I came to the east side of Los Angeles to be part of a church doing economic development work. We're trying to help small businesses get started in the neighborhood, to empower folks from the community. I was also coaching basketball at the local high school, which our church had been involved in for years and still is doing to this day as a way to get involved in the lives of youth. And for those who aren't familiar, the east side of LA has often actually been compared to the Ellis Island of Los Angeles. because it's been a place where generations of immigrants have come to land in the U.S. to build a home, to build a community, and then use that as a way to gain a foothold and create opportunity for themselves, even when they were excluded from other parts of the United States. So by the 1950s, East LA had become a mostly Mexican-American neighborhood. So East LA, Boyle Heights, Lincoln Heights, where my churches are all majority Mexican-American neighborhoods. And I moved in the middle of what you might describe as like tectonic plates shifting in the neighborhood, where around the 2010 to mid 2010s, there started to be a change, and the demographics of the neighborhood started to shift, and housing prices were rising. I'll talk more about that in a second. But there was a lot of resentment in the neighborhood towards the change that was happening, and I even had conversations with folks at my church who would be quite open with me that you came in, we actually aren't sure that this was a good idea because of what's happening broadly right now in the neighborhood. And you are a white guy from Virginia. And we're not sure we need more white guys in the neighborhood right now, which, of course, for me as I just explained something was a very hard thing to hear. But I came to appreciate the level of honesty, right, that folks had about what was going on, because it gave me an invitation to step into conversation and to learn from neighbors. This actually was quite a big item of news at the time. So you can see here some of the headlines from the 2010s in Boyle Heights. So there were a series of art galleries and coffee shops that a lot of neighborhood residents felt like were not serving the neighborhood. And some folks on the more extreme end of the folks who were concerned about gentrification started to vandalize and protest these businesses and say, hey, we need to do something, put our foot down to stop this. And so again, this was fairly disoriented to me because I was in the process of trying to help small businesses. And something we were thinking about was, well, how can we both empower individuals from the community, but also leverage money from outside the neighborhood to create opportunities, right? And so what I did for several years, and I think this is always the best response, is I read because I like to read, but I also had a lot of conversations with neighbors. And I think all good organizing efforts start from just having open-ended conversations with folks in your community. And what I saw that it was that actually a lot of folks in the neighborhood, their experience of gentrification was quite complex. Depending on who you talk to and their station in the neighborhood, they would have a very different picture of what was happening and what the pros were and what the cons were, and what they wanted to see change and what they wanted to see stopped and what they wanted to see improved from the situation they were right now. Some people mourned the loss of legacy businesses, and others were really excited that the first coffee shop had opened in the neighborhood. And for years, they had hoped that Starbucks would open a location. So the fact that it finally had on the east side was a great joy to them. But the reason that I became interested in housing was that the common thread, regardless of where they were coming from and their views on some of the impacts of gentrification, the common thread was housing and how housing was impacting their lives. And I think what was the thread that ran through everyone's story was either the fear that they would be displaced and priced out of the neighborhood, or people in their close family would be displaced and priced out of the neighborhood. And that was a legitimate fear. So when in 2012 in Lincoln Heights, the median home price was $267,000, which was up significantly from the year 2000 when it was about $141,000, but not that much significantly. But today it sits at $800,000. And this is a neighborhood where a lot of folks make, as a family, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, right? So the home price is sitting at 11, 12, 13 times the median income of many families, making homeownership just a distant dream, right, for a lot of folks. When I moved into Lincoln Heights, I rented a 2-bedroom home apartment for $1,200. And today I periodically go on Zillow and check, and the estimated rent for that place has gone up from $1,200 to $2,600 for a 2-bedroom. And this is a 2-bedroom that had mice, it had cockroaches. The landlord never fixed anything. Their solution to us calling to ask them to fix something was to not pick up the phone and hope we would stop calling. And that place, right, has seen rent. And I'm assuming they have not done anything to improve the unit since we have moved out. But even there, right, rent has become a price where most folks can't afford. And so I'm going to take a step back and say, when you talk about organizing, when you talk about thinking through what's going on in terms of housing, I found it to be really useful to use a tool called a problem tree, which is a visual way of trying to illustrate where on the spectrum from causes to effects the particular thing you're seeing is. So years ago, I went to the doctor. I had a migraine headache. Had migraines like weekly for months at that point. And the doctor prescribed me some extra strength pain medication to help deal with the migraines. And that medicine was really vital for me in the short term to be able to endure those headaches when they popped up in the course of daily life. But over the course of the conversation with my doctor also asked me a bunch of questions about my lifestyle, my overall health, because the doctor really wanted to drive at what are the root causes here, not just what can we do to alleviate the symptoms of this migraine headache, but what's causing it in the first place. Turns out that medicine doesn't actually understand migraine headaches very well, even in 2020. But thankfully, they were able to identify a few things they thought might be causing it, and I was able to make some lifestyle changes, and they didn't totally go away, but they went way down, and my quality of life improved. The reason I use this analogy is I think when we talk about gentrification, it's really important to situate gentrification in the broader scope of what we're seeing in Los Angeles in terms of housing. I know most of you all are in Pasadena or connected to Making Housing Community Happen, which is Pasadena based. But what I started to do when I expanded out beyond my neighborhood and started talking to other churches from other places in Los Angeles is actually hearing a lot of the same stories. And I know from conversations with Bert that a lot of those same stories are true in Pasadena as well. And that's because we're part of a regional housing market. And the choices that are made in one neighborhood in Los Angeles impact all the other neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And so in my journey to think through gentrification, one thing that I think is really important and actually would be, well, I could talk about lots of different things, but one thing I really want to focus on in my time today is how we think about addressing the housing problems we see across the region as a way to alleviate the symptoms of gentrification in my neighborhood. So at Faith and Housing, we've developed a framework that we call the 4 phases of the housing crisis. And it's a way to help people understand that while everyone's experience of the housing market is different, and some people are uniquely vulnerable to what's going on in our housing market, and again, gentrification is part of that, everyone is impacted by what we see broadly. So I'm gonna take you through just a few data points that we like to share, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And I think a lot of you, because you're connected to Making Housing Community Happen, you're probably already aware of some of these, but maybe you'll learn something new, and that's always our goal. So the first is just to illustrate the situation in home ownership in California writ large. So full disclosure, 1980 was before I was born. I was born after that. But in 1980 in California, if you were in the age demographic of 25 to 35, there's a 39% chance that you owned a home. Now, this is true for all Californians. This is not true. There's some demographics that saw different things, but that's a very high percentage. What we see today is that number has dropped to 16%, right? So 16% of Californians aged 25 to 35 today own a house, right? So home ownership has become something that a lot of folks are locked out of. And I think this is actually illustrated really well by actually looking at what happened to specific demographic groups. So African-American home ownership, because of the legacy of racism in our country, has always been lower than it has been for white Americans. But in 1980 in California, it was 11% for this age demographic, right? So which is a small but significant number of people. In 2021, that had dropped to 1%, right? 1% of African Americans between the age of 25 and 35 owned a home in 2021 in California. Among Hispanic Californians, it was 15% in 1980, and in 2021, that had dropped to 4%. So there's a conversation I had in my church with a bunch of guys who had all grown up in the neighborhood. And most of them were teachers, because I knew them from the high school. A few of them were coaches, a few of them worked in nonprofits. And we went around the circle. This was maybe 3 years ago. And every single one of them told me how they had been looking at homes somewhere in the Inland Empire or Arizona or Texas, just as like, hey, I will never be able to own a home here. Like, I went to college. I did the things that my teachers told me to do, but I will never be able to own a home here in East LA. And so they were just dreaming, like, hey, maybe I could take my family somewhere else and like buy a house. But that was just the reality that they had embraced by the 2020s. When you look at who is leaving California, just like these guys were thinking about leaving, the demographic that has been leaving California for the last 24 years, every year, is people without a college degree. right? So if you look at the number of people from within the US who move into California, excluding people who move into the US or into California internationally, just look at people who move into California from other states, people who move out from other states. We have been net losing people without, which in a neighborhood, like in Heights, when I moved in, the number of people who went to college was 5%, right? So this is 95% of the people in Lincoln Heights when I moved in 2014. Those folks are leaving California, have been for 24 straight years, right? Because they can no longer afford the rent, they can no longer afford home prices, they're being pushed out by housing. And what's interesting is the last 6 years, we've actually seen that apply to even folks with a bachelor's degree. So those folks I was talking about earlier, these teachers, even they were being priced out of their own neighborhood because of what had happened in terms of housing. And then, of course, we have the issue that we see. It's true across LA County, but we see it most acutely here in LA City, which is extreme housing insecurity. So I had the privilege last week of talking to some folks who actually were victims of the Altadena fires. They had lost their homes, and they were all renters. So none of them had homeowners insurance, none of them had renters insurance, and all of them are still living in insecure housing situations, living in cars, living in shelters. And actually, if you look at data on Los Angeles County, what I found astounding is that over 2 million people spend 50% of their income on housing. And 600,000 people, which is more people than are in some states in the United States, pay 90% of their income on housing, right? So we have 600,000 people across LA County who are extremely vulnerable to homelessness because they are spending so much money on usually rent that they just can't afford anything to go wrong. And so when we see right now, this is actually needs to be updated because the PIT count came out the other day and actually gone up to 73,000 people. But when we see 73,000 people who are homeless every year, it's because we see this huge number of people who are housing insecure, right? And that's that when something goes wrong, that pushes them into homelessness. And one data point that I'll highlight before I move on is that in some ways, the PIT count that we get every year for the number of people who are homeless undercounts people because it only counts people who are homeless on one day. The estimate is that if you actually look at people who will be homeless at some point this year, it's double the number of people who are officially reported in the PIT statistics, right? Because most people who become homeless in LA County, it's for a short period of time. It's actually a very small percentage of people who are the long-term chronically homeless folks that most people think of in terms of stereotype. So what you see across the income spectrum is that more and more people are being squeezed. And in a neighborhood like Lincoln Heights, where folks are more vulnerable, that squeezing is even more intense, right? Because people do not have the income, they don't have the wealth, they don't have the family. That often creates a safety net for folks. And so one analogy that has been used for this a lot, and I think is really apt, is musical chairs, right? When you have housing scarcity across a region, the people who are vulnerable, imagine someone playing the children's game of musical chairs, and there's not enough chairs, and they have a limp, right? Or they have some kind of disability that makes it hard for them to walk. They are going to be the person who is left out, right? If you are a owner, if you are people who are trying to get secure rental housing in Lincoln Heights, and you're comparing someone like me who has a college degree and a stable income versus someone who doesn't, like I am going to win that competition for that scarce chair, right? And that's really important for folks to know on an individual level, but it's also important for us to know on a regional level, because if we don't address the issue that there aren't enough chairs, it's going to be very hard for us to make progress. And so what I started to see is that gentrification is a symptom that needs to be treated, but it is also a symptom that we need to attach it to the problem of this broader issue of housing scarcity. And I think the thing that I started to realize, and I think that's especially important for folks in the church to hear, is that
travel itinerary location indicator.
Well, we have someone on their phone. Would you be able to mute yourself? We can hear you in the background at 818 number. Go for it, Thomas.
I'm going to keep going. So the last point I make, which is that I think it's really important in the church to see the fates of our neighborhoods tied up together. So this is a map. This is housing that has been built in Los Angeles since the year 2000. I don't know how familiar you are with the geography of LA, but these are two adjoining neighborhoods. One is Koreatown. Koreatown is a neighborhood that has historically been a neighborhood where first generation immigrants have come Again, similar to Lincoln Heights, right? Establish their family, find a cheap place to stay, and then expand from there. And Koreatown has built a lot of housing, right? You can see here in the dots, these are all housing projects that have gone up. Now, next door is Hancock Park. Hancock Park is one of the wealthiest and most exclusive neighborhoods in all of California, right? It is a place where they literally have a separate zoning code called estate zoning for Hancock Park, because they want to make sure that you can't build on anything smaller than a 50,000 square foot lot, right? Most of us probably live on, like, we live in a single family home, we probably live in a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot lot. Hancock Park is 10 times that, is the minimum size that you can live in. And there's been almost no housing built in Hancock Park on this map at all in the last 25 years. And of course, if you overlay this against household income, you will notice that the areas where there's a lot of home building are the areas where there's lower household income, and the areas where there's not a lot of home building are the higher household income areas, like Hancock Park. This is San Marino. I don't know if anyone here lives in San Marino, but wealthy area. This is the amount of housing that has been built in San Marino since the year, multifamily housing. So taking out redeveloped single family homes. This is the amount of multifamily housing that's been built in the city of San Marino since the year 2000. The answer is 0, right? 0 units of housing have been built in San Marino since the year 2000. Again, San Marino, one of the wealthiest, the most exclusive neighborhoods. This is the zoning in San Marino, California, right? 98% of land is zoned exclusively for single family, often large, like similar to Hancock Park, large lot single family homes, right? And so what I started to realize, right, as I thought about gentrification in my neighborhood, I think it was really important for folks in the church broadly to see is that gentrification is a symptom of housing scarcity. And that one of the causes of housing scarcity in our region is the fact that we have so many neighborhoods that have just opted out of contributing housing to what we need in California. And so that is a huge part of what we're seeing. And it's a huge part of what we need to address. There are things we need to address in neighborhoods that are gentrifying to protect tenants, to protect people, to give folks an opportunity at home ownership. But there are also things we need to do in these exclusive neighborhoods. And at Faith in Housing, similar to what you all are doing at Making Housing Community Happen, that's something we are trying to address through campaigns we are working on right now. I won't go into the details. These are the 3 campaigns we have launched in 2026 and are trying to address. I won't go into the details of all of them because I'm over time. But I will just briefly say we're trying to say, hey, what is housing that will better serve families in our region? What is housing that will better serve renters, especially renters at the very bottom, folks who are coming out of homelessness, folks who are students, folks who are first generation immigrants who just need a room to rent, right? How do you bring back that kind of housing in LA? And then development without displacement. How do you do this without displacing folks who already have access to existing affordable housing? Like, what are the tools and policies? And that's actually something we've been in dialogue with Bert about and Making Housing Community Happen. Are there things we can do on a state level? Which again, I won't go into all the details of that. But I just wanted to give a brief overview of what that looks like. And I think these are all 3 tools that if we don't address gentrification, we don't address housing scarcity and exclusive neighborhoods by using all of these tools in our toolbox. What I came to realize living in my neighborhood is my neighbors aren't going to have a chance to live the good life in the way that they hoped for. And so if you're interested in learning more about Faith in Housing, you can scan these QR codes and learn more about what we're doing. We have similar ethos to what you all are doing up in Pasadena. We are eager to work together going forward. So I will stop there and pass it over. I believe there will be a time of Q&A at the end. So if I said something that you have a lot of questions about, feel free to hold on to that and bring it back at the end. But I'm going to pass it on for the next section.
Thank you, Thomas. That was fantastic. And you're right, we'll do Q&A at the end. And then next, I'm going to hand it off to Jill. And then, Jill, did you want to do the video or did you want to go straight into your story?
I think the video is excellent. I'd like to introduce it. We'll see if we can squeeze my time shorter to make that happen. So the The video that we're going to watch is just slightly over three minutes. And Genee Johnson is a dream, as you'll see in the video. She is a typical wonderful church member on North Fair Oaks. We've been doing work for all these years. And it's, when I say typical, this is often the story you hear in some of those churches that have emptied out. There's one church that only has 8 members left. Other churches are now pretty much all commuter churches. So I'm happy you get to know her just a little bit in this way. Thanks.
My name is Genee Johnson. This is my housing story. I'm 36 years old, born and raised in Pasadena, and lived here until January 2018, when my family and I could no longer afford the rent. Now I commute to work in Pasadena and to worship at Bethel Missionary Baptist Church on North Fair Oaks. I'm a child development teacher, hairstylist, and cleaning specialist. My parents, my 3 sisters, and I were always good renters. My parents worked all of their lives, and now in their mid-70s, operate their own small house cleaning business to make ends meet. We rented our last house here for about 22 years before we got the notice to vacate in an 8-month range, because the owner had to pay off debt as soon as possible. Our rent back then was about $24.50 a month, and in 8 months, we could not find a 3-bedroom home at that price in Pasadena. Most 1 to 2 bedroom apartments at the low end of the market then started at $2,500 a month, and moving fees were really high. We had no place to move when we left our home. We had to go to Ontario, where for the next 6 months, we lived in motels with half of our possessions in the trunk of the car and the other half just neatly arranged in our motel room. We looked in cities as far as 50 miles east and west on the 210 freeway without success. Finally, tired of finding so many surprises in every motel room, like drug paraphernalia, we asked for help. Our family split to cope, moving in with friends and family who could offer us a room at that time. Some of us moved to Lancaster, some of us stayed in Ontario. I moved to Las Vegas. Just before the pandemic, my parents and my 3 sisters rented a house in Pomona. During the pandemic, I returned from Las Vegas to join them. Since then, I adapted a new way of living. My biggest expenses right now are gasoline, my car maintenance, and food. I miss living in Pasadena. It's a joy to work in my hometown. It's where I worship. But I often pray that God will get our politicians to consider the damage we do to our environment when working people in the millions must be in LA traffic for long hours before and after work. I also pray that housing can be affordable for other families from my congregation and the surrounding communities. I dream in prayers of living in Pasadena's diversity, in a stable job I can get to on my bike or the bus, and able to visit my parents with love and support at this stage of their lives. I pray for a Pasadena whose community reflects the diversity of God's creation, where we can live with compassion and cooperation.
Isn't that a great video? I just love Genee. So I purchased my home in Northwest Pasadena in 1994, believe it or not, at $143,500. And I immediately became a gentrifier. Our previous speaker, Thomas, shared about Dr. John Perkins, and he too was my mentor, African-American man with a 3rd grade education and yet received 19 honorary doctorates. He taught me about the 3 R's: relocation, distribution of wealth, and reconciliation between us and God and all racial and ethnic diversities and economic levels. So when I went to purchase my home, to relocate into a lower income, primarily Black neighborhood, it was my intention just to have a home to live in. But I had no idea that by improving my home, I was beginning to see some of my neighbors priced out. Many others that look like me followed and bought homes, and I started seeing neighbors go into foreclosure. I saw others that rents going up and just having to completely leave our community. And so it just broke my heart. This is, there was the more affordable part of the city of Pasadena. At that point, there was a great need for affordable housing. But since it's gotten so gentrified, there's still a need for affordable housing because the only thing that really addresses affordable housing or addresses gentrification is affordable housing. So I wanted to mention just about two of the pastors I know that lived here in Pasadena, had homes that were just lovely here, but they began to see the opportunity to cash out. So they moved, sold their homes, moved to Lancaster and Fontana, weathered the traffic, as Genee mentioned, and but they began to see other church members follow their same example. And so several churches now have become, like I mentioned before, commuter churches. I watched their homes be flipped several times. So essentially others were getting wealthy off of their homes. And it just broke my heart. Others I know have had to leave Pasadena because they got into bad reverse mortgages. So there's a lot of ways we can address this. But what hit me the most when I became a gentrifier, it also compelled me to do something about it. So it's become, even though I became part of the problem, I wanted to become part of the solution. And that's when I committed myself to figure out how to retain a mixed income community in perpetuity. And so at the same time that I bought my house, with my parents' help, I had started an after-school program, was in the process of getting that off the ground at Lake Avenue Church called STARS. And the students in the program began to drop out when they entered high school. So they could work or babysit so the parents would be able to afford their apartments. But whole apartments were being sold out from under them and flipped to higher prices. So I tried to imagine what we could do. How do we address this? We wanted to spend time with these youth we had invested our lives in. And that's when I learned about affordable housing. There was a complex in their neighborhood called Agape Court. It was a faith-based affordable housing development, and they had openings. And so I was able to move some of the STARS families into that complex. And it was quite amazing because when parents were spending only a third of their income on housing, they no longer needed to work 3 and 4 jobs or to have the children work. They had time for their children. And as we followed these families, they were the first in their families to graduate from college. And so I saw how totally transformational the power of affordable housing can be to address gentrification and displacement. So there's many ways to address it. I'm gonna talk about 5 ways quickly of how our organization has sought to address gentrification. But you may be thinking also of other policy initiatives. I'd love to hear more of what Thomas Irwin is actually doing as well. So one of the first things we did was advocate for inclusionary, which Bert mentioned at the beginning. So I was part of Leadership Pasadena at that time. And it was so exciting to be part of a team and the momentum of a large group coming together and debating, should we have 15%, 20%, or 25% of the developments of each development market rate in the city be set aside to be affordable. So the debate with the city ended that it would be that it would be 15%. It was all quite an emotional, exciting moment to be catapulted into this movement. And that's also what sold me, that sense of camaraderie, the sense of coming together to create a change in our community. So what that policy has done since then has produced about 1,600 apartments and homeownership units at no cost to the city to stay permanently affordable. In fact, it's put about 30 million into our city's affordable housing trust fund to produce even more housing. So, but that works in combination with the state density bonus law. So I'd love to see this in every city, and I'd love to see it in our whole state. Like the state of Massachusetts and New Jersey that both have statewide inclusionary programs. Pasadena's previous housing director, Bill Wong, he would always say the only way to really address gentrification is through affordable housing. And so there's all different kinds of affordable. Only one form is the inclusionary, requiring by law that it be set aside as affordable. But there's also multifamily developments that are 100% affordable, and that's essential to address the severe housing crisis that we're in. We need to have those larger developments, and we need to think about going up and being better stewards of the land that we have. I feel grateful to be in a city that supports affordable housing. So today, 1 in 10 people in our city actually live in affordable housing, which is quite amazing. So it's important that we make sure it's long lasting. And so typically affordable housing is 55 to 65 years. That's when an affordable housing covenant is expired. But we have a strong push in the city, and we have made sure that almost all of our affordable housing has been renewed and preserved to be affordable for the long haul. There's a third way I want to mention about how we can address gentrification, and that's through a local preference policy. So we wanted to make sure that people that have been displaced from our city have an opportunity to return. So our local preference policy, essentially the first priority is that 20% of all of these affordable housing units would be set aside for those that have been displaced over the last 10 years. And so there's still some things to strengthen that policy, but it's thrilling that is now part of our city's policy. So I've written a book on what churches are doing to address the housing crisis nationwide. And each chapter is a different model and a different way to create affordability. Some of you may be motivated to write books or articles like our organization has, weekly newsletters to help get the word out in ways we can address gentrification and displacement. But one of my favorite models in the book was written by a gentleman looking at a community land trust in the state of Maine. And so I love that model. It's where you own the home, but not the land. The land is kept off the speculative market and put into a trust. And so that is what my husband Anthony and I plan to do. We now have it in our living trust that our home will go into the San Gabriel Valley Community Land Trust, which we had the joy of helping to get started. And so some of you also may be motivated to think about starting a community land trust or putting your home into one, or encouraging others that may not have children that need to inherit land like we do, or homes. So in preparation for this talk this evening, I started by listing out a number of ways to address gentrification displacement, and my list became extremely long, but I'm just going to zero in on one or two additional ways that our organization is starting to look at ways to address it. And so first I want to mention that with all the cuts at the federal level, for housing, it's essential that we find local dedicated funding sources. And so one way to do that is through vacancy tax, which has multiple benefits. Not only does it bring more tax into the city to produce even more housing, but it also can serve to penalize large investors. So large investors and corporate investors often pay cash for homes. They buy properties in bulk, and so they can push the property value or the cost of housing much higher. And so with a vacancy tax, you can actually deter investors from holding on to the properties until they get a better price. And there's a number of good examples. It's been done here in the U.S., in Washington, D.C., in Oakland, California, Berkeley, France, Ireland, and Canada. There's a federal policy in Canada that that's also, as well as what we just passed in the U.S. recently, that prevents. It's called the Road Home, and that prevents investors from buying a larger number. That's kind of my next point on transfer tax, but the whole arena of making sure that a vacancy tax has a higher penalty for those that are investors. So I'm going to talk about just one more item and then close out. So the policy that our organization is also working on is the transfer tax that Bert mentioned. So this was in what's called the housing element. It's a statewide requirement that every city plan for enough housing for all income levels. And it says that we should now, in our city's planning, consider this as a real option. So essentially, there's a fee. There's a fee that's attached to every time any property is transfers hands. And so this one-time fee is actually quite low in most cities. It's just around $1.50 per square foot. And that can be increased up to $18, which I don't think is wise. That's way too high. We don't want to stop all development. But there's a fine line and a balance in all of this. And so you don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg of money and funds that we need to run our cities, to do our work, and to build housing. But there's jurisdictions around the globe that are making sure that higher transfer taxes, especially for foreign investors and large investors, are in place. So it's exciting that we were able to get this federal. It's called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act that was just passed even a few weeks ago in our country, which is pretty historic. And so that makes it so that investors that own more than 350 single-family homes cannot purchase more than that. And so there's a lot more details to it than that. But I'm sure there's a lot more ideas that you could even think of ways to address gentrification. And so, but it does take research. It takes discussions like this, and it also was so exciting for me to be initially involved clear back in 2002 with Leadership Pasadena when we were debating over the inclusionary, what percentage should be set aside in all the different market rate developments of 10 units or more. So that particular policy here in Pasadena, also they're thinking about lowering it to 5 units or more, which I hope we do, so we can capture even more housing that's affordable. But there's a strong sense of community and common challenge that we share together. And it's infectious and thrilling when we can show up together at public meetings and have what we have researched and carefully studied to be heard by our elected officials. And we're truly making a real difference. So it's a real privilege, and I thank you for the opportunity right now to share with you just some of the things we've done and some of the ideas, but there's a whole lot more. Thanks.
Thanks, Jill. That was fantastic. And then before we head into Q&A, Anthony's going to give us some call to actions, things that we can actually do to solve these issues. He's already put some things in the chat, so make sure to check those out. Anthony?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share the, let's see. Can you see this? Can you all see
Not
this
yet.
and hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. So
We
what I'm
can
going
see, contact Sacha Paris.
yeah. So
it looks blurry from my end. I don't know
Yeah,
about
it's
others.
blurry. Yeah.
is it blurry? Oh my.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Not much I can do about it, unfortunately.
You can read to us what it says.
Some kind of
Yeah.
low resolution.
Yeah, I will. Well, let me just first of all say that we understand that the residents of Altadena who have been displaced have suffered great trauma, and they are very concerned, and understandably, to see their community restored to what it was and to what it can be in the future. It has been a community where there has been a large African American population. There's been a lot of diversity economically and socially. And I think it's been also a community where single family homes have been built and occupied, and it creates a sense of identity for the community. There's a great opposition to having developers come in and purchase lots and homes. I think 40% of the vacant homes have been bought by developers, and there's a strong desire to prevent that from happening. So that's a little bit of context for what I'm going to share with you. And we, by the way, do not want to see developers come in and purchase lots and homes and end up making them unaffordable, because that will really affect the demographic character of Altadena in a significant and a negative way. So in an effort to respond to this, Senator Sacha Paris has come up with a bill called SB 1090. And this bill would prevent two other bills, SB 9 and SB 1123, from being utilized by residents of Pasadena. And the idea behind this, it would somehow prevent developers from coming in and purchasing properties that would be detrimental to the neighborhood. So let me just say why we question that and why we support some nonprofits, Green Line Foundation and Earthseed Community Land Trust, that want to utilize particularly SB 1123 for affordable housing. We always want to see affordable housing. First of all, I'm going to talk about SB 1123, and I'll talk about SB 9 as well. We support SB 9 because it really doesn't apply to developers. SB 9 allows a owner-occupied home to split the lot and to sell half the lot to another homeowner. The homeowner who sells the lot must live there for 3 years at least after splitting the lot. And this is an opportunity for cash-strapped homeowners who've lost their homes in Altadena and don't have enough funds to rebuild to sell half of their property and utilize that funds to rebuild their home. It also ensures that both homes will be slightly more affordable because they're on smaller lots. So we feel that that there should be a carve-out for owner-occupied homes utilizing SB 9. This will not in any way benefit developers, but it will benefit homeowners who are having trouble rebuilding. The other one, SB 1123, is a little more complicated because it allows up to 10 units to be built on a lot. And that's been very scary, the idea of 10 units on a lot. But just to put into context, in order to build 10 units on even a small lot, like 2,000 square feet, you'd have to have at least half an acre, And the and then in order to apply SB 1123, 3/4 of the properties around it have to be built out. They can't be vacant lots. So very, very few lots would apply, would qualify for SB 1123. In fact, all of the developers who've tried to utilize it have been turned down by the Board of Supervisors because they don't meet the strict qualifications. But putting that aside, what we want to do is stand in solidarity with the Green Line Foundation and Earthseed Community Land Trust, because they feel that they can utilize SB 1123 to build more affordable housing. So if you agree that this carve-out, this very specific carve-out, makes sense, we're encouraging you to contact Senator Sasha Perez, and I've given her phone number, which is 626 304 1086. That's 626 304 1086. And I think I'll put this in the chat so you can see it. So that's our first call to action. And
Can I just add something to that quickly,
Sure.
Anthony?
Sure.
Is that okay? So it's a carve out only in the case of affordability.
Exactly.
And so it does not allow investors to use this. It only carves out if it's an affordable housing developer or someone that's going to make sure there's a right to return.
Right. Exactly. And we don't want to see developers come in and purchase lots and build unaffordable housing. I mean, if you have a 1 acre lot and you're a developer and you purchase it, the chances are you're going to build a big house, 3,000 or 4,000 square feet home that's going to be several $1 million. So, if the option is to divide that lot into smaller units and make them affordable, that would be preferable. And that's what I think Green Line Housing Foundation wants to do. So we support it with the understanding that it only applies to nonprofits and only for affordable housing. So that's number one. The other thing,
if you call Sasha Perez, just ask her to include the carve out for affordability, and she already supports that. She just needs additional support. To make sure that happens.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. That's true. The other thing that we're concerned about is rent stabilization, rent control here in Pasadena. We worked really hard to get Measure H passed and to get rent control in our city. And now the landlords are trying to repeal and replace it. Literally, that's what they're trying to do. They've gotten a lot of money together to hire signature gatherers. I encountered one just the other day at the farmers market at Villa Park, and this woman lied to me. She told me a lot of inaccurate information, implying that the Pasadena Fair Housing Charter Amendment would actually benefit tenants. And she told me a lot of untrue statements. And this is happening a lot. So if someone comes up to you with a petition that says, this is a petition to protect tenants, check it out. If it's the Pasadena Fair Housing Charter Amendment, the actual wording is repeal and replace rent stabilization and eviction protection in Pasadena and repeal Ordinance 7417. So essentially what the landlords are doing is trying to get rid of rent control in our city and hiring people who to gather signatures. So please, if you've signed it, there's a way out for you. There you can remove your signature by writing to the city clerk, and I put in the chat a link that you can download a document that is an official document because you have to sign it with your signature, and then mail it in to the city clerk. Also, if you have been approached by one of these signature gatherers and they've given you false information about it, by all means, contact the city clerk and let them know that this is what's going on. I have done that because I was quite upset by what happened. And actually, two of my friends at the farmers market Rob Mathia and his wife Lisa had signed the petition, thinking it was to benefit tenants. And when I explained what happened, they were appalled, and they went over and they deleted their signatures. So these are the actions that we're recommending. We want to. I think rent control has been really great policy in our city, and we don't want to see it eliminated or watered down. Okay, that's my call to action.
Yeah, and if you're somebody who knows a lot about the current rent control and knows what's going on, it helps talking to the signature gatherers. Sometimes the ones they know what they're doing, they might be a part too. I have heard of one who quit his job on the spot when he found out what he was promoting.
Mm-hmm.
According to Ryan Bell of Pasadena Tenants Union, and I heard this from someone else too, because I haven't read through the petition they're having people sign, but according to him, and someone else that said this, the petition actually is not only repealing and replacing, but what it's replacing would only maintain rent control for 10 years and then it would phase out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually phasing out rent control. And I think it'll immediately withdraw. Did you say that, Anthony? I can't remember if you said that. But
yeah.
It will,
huh? Yeah, it will repeal and replace.
Yeah, you said that, but yeah, but what it replaces with, because they'll tell you that it will maintain rent control, but only for 10 years.
Right.
And it'll immediately withdraw tenant protections from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was a question about the vacancy tax. I think it was Laura, it was your question, right? Yeah. So we met with the people in Oakland and in Berkeley. And Berkeley, the vacancy tax is applied only to residential. And in Oakland, it's applied to residential and commercial. And they're each different. Every community that has one does it a little bit differently. As I recall, Oakland, one of the things was if it's vacant more than 50 days a year. So they allowed it to be vacant more than 50 days a year. Yeah, so somehow they were my brain's not working right tonight, but somehow they were allowing flea markets. I think flea markets operated 50 days a year, so they wanted to let them exist, and so they didn't want to bother the flea markets or the farmers markets. And anyway, they have different. You look at each one, and each one's different. But some of them cover just residential, some of them cover both. I don't know if I've come across one that covers only commercial, but there may be one out there.
I was amazed how other countries have such strong vacancy tax and investor transfer fees. All of Canada has a powerful one, and France and Ireland. So it'd be interesting to study what they're doing in other countries too. Yeah. Are there other questions that people have or comments? Can you share, Thomas, some of the things that you're doing to help address gentrification in East LA?
Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute and I was like clicking the button and it wasn't working. So yeah, I think I think part of what I shared, right, is like I think there's a need to address housing exclusivity in high opportunity neighborhoods. And so I think the best pathway there has been on the state level. We putting aside the earlier conversation about Altadena, where we don't really have a position since we don't have a presence there, but like we were strong supporters of SB 9 and SB 1123 because it gives tools to make family housing more attainable for more folks, especially in areas which there's huge swaths of Los Angeles that are exclusively single family zones, and so it's very, very hard for young families to get into those places. And so I've actually now lived in the East Side for long enough that there are people who I know outside of my work in the neighborhood who live like on the West Side, who they start looking for a home and they buy a home on the East Side when that was not their original intention. The original intention was to stay close to where their church and work is on the West Side or in, other areas of the city. And they move here because they're like, oh, well, the houses here cost $700,000 and where I live, they're 2 million, right? And that spread is just so big, right? So if the houses in the West Side cost 1 million, that's still a lot. That would be way more than my neighbors could afford. But some of these folks are like lawyers and doctors, like they could actually afford that and stay. And then that is a unit that actually could go to a second generation person from our neighborhood. So Alex Dobbs is a colleague of mine. He's actually been talking to Bert quite a bit about local preference policies. We don't have currently a local preference policy in LA. We think that could be a really useful tool. We've been talking in different contexts. There's some contexts in which it seems like it's working well, and some contexts in which it has become more of a bureaucratic exercise than like an actual like useful policy. And so like we're trying to learn the lessons of like how do you do that well, and potentially look at that. That could be something local to LA. That could also be something statewide. Alex was working on looking at things you could do on the state level when it comes to that. I think one of my passion projects that is probably, to be honest, like a few years away from being something that could actually be politically viable. Two passion projects. One is seeing what we can do to bring back co-living and single room occupancy. I think my heart there is more for homelessness because I think there's a lot of folks. It's amazing to me that for most of LA's history, you had, basically single room rentals existing with no subsidy for folks who are in desperate situations, right?
Yeah.
And it just doesn't exist anymore. And I think most folks who are concerned about gentrification, they're not at the level where they would immediately turn to that, but it's a safety net, right? Single room. And actually, I think the biggest safety net, there's actually this really interesting research that's coming out about the biggest source of affordable housing for folks who are in vulnerable situations is actually spare bedrooms in existing housing.
Mm-hmm.
It's family. Family and friends are the biggest source of affordable housing. And I think that's why ADUs have been such a fantastic reform, because it's just, you were talking about earlier, right? It's created a pathway to legalizing an arrangement that people in LA have been doing forever, like under the table. And I think we should make it easier to do that on the small scale, but we should also try to do it on the larger scale. And I think there's a lot of folks who end up displaced where had they had an option to rent a room in the community, I think for Altadena fire victims, that is like, how serving would it be to just have single rooms available for folks to rent for 6 months to get back on their feet and get back into housing? I think that would be a pretty transformative policy. But to be blunt, so like the level of NIMBY opposition to that is going to be very, very strong because of what people see when they think about homelessness. They think about folks who would be in a situation to rent those rooms, which I think that, we're the church, right? So part of our job is to try to push back on that. But I think there's a need, there's a real gap right now in our housing stock for in that space. So, and I think students too, like the rate of housing insecurity among college students is huge. And I know multiple students who have gone through some period where they've lived in a car RV just to get through like 4-year education. So that's not gentrification. It's more on the homelessness side. But I think the two end up being linked because gentrification can push people into homelessness, and then and vice versa. So
can I add something about the situation in Altadena? Typically, after a disaster, home prices go up after about 3 years. There was a study done of about 12 different communities where there had been natural disasters. And initially, the prices of homes go down a little bit, but they always come back, and sometimes up to 40%. So we can be fairly confident that unless there is something to counter that, uh, the prices of housing in Altadena will become unaffordable for the people who previously lived there. And I've talked to people from the Altadena Tenants Union, and there was a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing, just what you're describing, people who are living in a room, people who are living in ADU, and people who are living with rent control. And when this county has rent control, and when the multifamily apartment building burns down or becomes unoccupied, there goes rent control for that, you know, so it's going to be unless there's really some steps taken to make housing more affordable in Altadena, it's going to be a different kind of demographic. It's going to be a community of wealthy people, not of the kind of homeowners who lived there in the past, and renters as well.
Yeah, we were at a Juneteenth event in Altadena, and we were sitting next to the people who are running the Altadena Tenants Union. And I was really surprised to learn how all that rental housing in Altadena that was, there for a sizable number of Altadenans will never be under rent control again. Because once you build it new, it no longer applies to rent control. It only applies to older apartments that had a certain age, and then it would apply to those. So yeah, I was thought too about, Thomas, what you were saying in terms of the single room occupancy, the SROs. What we're calling those now in Pasadena is a micro units. And we've had one that's built here in Pasadena that's affordable. But I'm with you. I think it's a great policy, and it applies here by right anywhere in commercial property, which is interesting. So it shifts that commercial property to allow it to become residential. But you've got some great ideas, and I thank you for your thinking and all the reading you've done and research. You did a really great job in your presentation.
Any additional thoughts, comments, questions before we end our evening together?
Just if you haven't read, comment put in the chat by Nancy. It's kind of interesting situation in Hawaii.
Yeah, what'd she say? I didn't get a chance to read it.
Yeah, it's gentrification. It's what we would call howlification. It's the howlies, so it's displaced a lot of the local families and folks from the mainland, a lot of them probably from California, but from all over actually, who are, pretty well off. And so that's what's been happening here. And it's just sad to see.
There's just wealthy people moving in from the mainland.
Yep. Yeah.
What time is it there for you? I'm curious, Nancy.
Oh, it's 5:25. Well, and I worked for Hawaiian Homelands, and so a lot of our Hawaiian families are overcrowded because they can't afford to rent their own homes. And so we're talking 2-3 families living together in older homes, dilapidated homes. And yeah, it's really kind of a crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
I
you
didn't
have
know
something
that.
you were going to say, Laura?
You're muted, Laura. You have to unmute.
We can't hear you. There we go.
No, I just have a question about this green line, right? Yeah, because, I heard about that soon after the fire, but I don't think it's as generally known in Altadena as it could be. There are people who have to sell, and I don't think they really I don't think Greenland has had a very high profile. It's my understanding that Greenland can either sell, to somebody who's going to be a homeowner, going to stay there, not going to sell, or they can keep the property until the Altadena is able to come back. And so it seems really good thing to me, but people need to know about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, they do some beautiful work.
I think they're doing some fabulous work, but they're focusing on people of color. And I wonder if their low profile is related to the fact that they could come under attack from the government because they're focusing on a particular group. And as we know, the government is opposed to anything that sounds like DEI. So or that singles out a particular group. But they have done amazing work in helping people of color to move back to Altadena by providing down payment assistance and sometimes filling the gap between what the insurance covered and what they need to rebuild.
Right. Yeah, I guess that just needs to be publicized more. But then they shouldn't limit it just to people of color, because Altadena not only have a lot of white people like me, but they have so many mixed families that it's sometimes hard to tell what anybody is. I mean, Altadenas just don't think that way.
Well, I want to make an announcement. I appreciate what you're saying, Laura. Thank you for that. I want to make an announcement, and I'm going to put it in chat. Upcoming is our next cohort that Bert mentioned for congregations that want to explore having affordable housing on a portion of their land. And so it's a 5-session cohort, and it's educational and like a workshop as well, in sense, for churches. So if you know of churches that might want to consider affordable in their rebuild in Altadena, it's a great opportunity and to learn about that and what it would take to really make that happen, and to get funding, for their rebuild. If it's anywhere in Southern Cal, so you may know of churches in other areas, even in East LA, that would be interested in this. So we do all the professional feasibility. We have architects, we have land use specialists and affordable housing experts in finance. So we provide an opportunity to various scenarios along the lines of what the church really wants to see.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the houses of worship in Altadena are gone, and the congregations of those places are nesting in another congregation. So
they all want to rebuild, and
yeah, but that's pretty neat. I mean, to have a mosque that's in a Protestant church,
Yeah, we've had that at our church.
Yeah.
We have a mosque, and we also have the Jewish temple at our church. So
yeah, the temple, that's
Well, I've enjoyed being with you all tonight, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity that we can continue to learn and share from each other and go forth and do good work in the world.
So kudos to Thomas for staying up so late.
Okay.
Over on the East Coast.
Yep. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to close down the filming right now. Okay. But we can continue. Okay.